So we are here today to talk about the phylum Mollusca. We are in the domain Eukarya, the kingdom Animalia, and the phylum Mollusca. We're also going to look at the classes bivalves, gastropods, and cephalopods. So in the first column of your chart, we're going to look at what it is just to be a mollusk. They can live in the ocean, they can live in freshwater, moist land, but they do have to have some type of moisture. As you can see by the arrow, they all have bilateral symmetry. They do have this true body cavity, or the coelom. They have two body openings. And two of the unique things is that they have a muscular foot, and it's been modified in some. And they also have a mantle. Now, the mantle is going to do different things in different classes. But typically, a mantle is a thin membrane that surrounds the internal organs, and some of them can secrete a shell. Others can secrete a mucus, and they have some different functions in each of the classes. Additionally, many of the mollusks have or did throughout evolutionary time a radula. And so inside the mouth, these can be used like a scraping organ. So if you've ever watched a snail crawl along the glass and it has these little rows of teeth that'll just scratch at the algae. So the first class we're going to look at are the gastropods. Now, gastro means stomach, and pod or poda is the feet, so it's a stomach foot. So that muscular foot is what they're going to use to move around. Some of the examples are snails, conchs, limpets, slugs, sea slugs, or nudibranchs. Now, I've told you guys, I think before, that we don't pronounce the CH in science as a ch. They're not conches and they're not nudibranches. It's a hard C, like nudibranchs. Gastropods can have one shell or no shell. So we're talking about different snails and sea slugs. If they don't have a shell, if that mantle is not making a shell, then it's going to produce a thick mucus, and sometimes that mucus can actually be toxic. So the name itself means stomach foot, and they use that foot to move. They have a radula, so they have this grinding thing that they can go along and scrape up the algae. And a unique quality is that they have an open circulatory system. So what that's going to mean, and I'll explain this more in class, is their blood is not going to flow through anything like blood vessels. It basically bathes over the organs, and I'll give you some better examples in class, but that's something to put down, is that they have an open circulatory system. They have gills, and they have nephridia. Now, nephridia are primitive kidneys. So like in humans, we have nephrons as a part of our kidneys. Nephridia are primitive kidneys, so they're able to basically filter out waste. A really cool fact is that nudibranchs can eat jellyfish, and they can use those cnidarians' nematocysts as their own weapons. They actually absorb it into their tissue, and now the nudibranch can sting creatures. This still somewhat baffles scientists, but it is a pretty neat fact. So down here are some examples. You have little snails, little limpets, different creatures like that. So if you're looking at your phylum, some examples of gastropods: snails, conchs, limpets, slugs. Feeding, they use a radula to scrape the algae. Reproduction, they actually have a courtship behavior. And some of them will actually release something called a love dart. And I will explain a little bit more in class about the courtship behavior. They are typically hermaphrodites, and they can actually have elaborate, beautiful egg cases. And I will show you some of the egg cases actually in class, I have a few of them. Unique qualities, they can have one shell or no shell, and they have an open circulatory system and a primitive kidney. So that is your gastropods. For the next group are bivalves, and the bivalves include clams. They have mussels, oysters, and scallops. These are the group that are good to eat. They can live in fresh or salt water, and they are bi because the bi means two, and then they have two valves. They also have two shells that are basically hinged with muscles, so that muscular foot helps them to move around, and then they have two muscles in the shells that help it open and close. Um, Bivalves, as far as feeding, they lack a radula, so they actually filter feed. They basically bring in water through a siphon. It runs through their gills. The gills actually separate out particles, and then it leaves through another excurrent siphon. As far as reproduction, no, that's the next group. Sorry, as far as reproduction goes, they have separate sexes as well as being hermaphrodites. Some of them can take the sperm in through the siphon and fertilize and then release the little larva. Others will actually have external spawning. Basically, they just release their gametes into the water. Also, the bivalves have another open circulatory system. And one thing they've lost to evolution is if you look at these guys, there's no head. There's no head end or butt end. They have lost that cephalization that we gained when we had the platyhelminthes. So over time, they've lost that, and they don't have that end. All right, our last group are these cephalopods. Cephala means head, pod means foot. So these are head-footed mollusks. Lots of examples here. I love my Dumbo octopus here. He's really deep in the ocean. Totally cool. Nautilus, squid, cuttlefish. We have the octopus up here. And these are the most complex. They actually can remember things and think through problems. They've given them little things to do, and they've been able to learn from each other. So they're much more evolved. They have tentacles that capture prey, and they've changed that muscle. Instead of having a foot that lets them walk, they have a really powerful muscle that can propel water out of a siphon. So they have jet propulsion. So a unique quality is that jet propulsion. A lot of them can have ink, and some of the ink can actually have toxins. So as far as the cephalopods go, to eat, they actually have a beak and a radula. And it looks just like an actual, like an owl's or bird's beak, and I will show that to you in class. And so they'll bite something and release digestive enzymes to start to separate it and break it down. For reproduction, I'll show you a few quick video clips in class. They have separate sexes. They have boys and girls, and they will often transfer the sperm lots of different ways. We'll talk about the indiscriminate squid and some of the others, but a lot of times they'll have little packets, and they will actually transfer the sperm. Some have really neat mating habits, like the opalescent squid. They all mate at one time, and they die, and just leave this blanket of eggs all over the seafloor so that the fish eat all the dead squid instead of the eggs. It's really, just thousands of these squid die at once. For unique qualities for cephalopods, also, we have something called a closed circulatory system. No longer do we have an open circulatory system. The circulatory system is closed to where there's actually blood vessels. So here is a quick page that shows some of the elaborate egg cases, and we will look over this in class. So this should be enough to finish the chart, and we'll move on. The next video will be annelids.